My name is John Dalton. It is June 9th, 2011. I'm here with Garry Shandling to do the interview for the Archive of American Television in Los Angeles, California.
Then we never see him again, right?
Garry, the first thing I'd like to do today
That's
is...
how you're starting?
Yeah.
Wow.
Is to take a few minutes.
They don't know that right before, but you started rolling. I said, just be yourself. And then I let you get one word out. And I go, what? That's how you're going to be? That's your choice for my very special... what is it that I'm doing?
That's the choice for everybody.
Okay.
That's what we do with everybody.
Well, that makes me feel special.
We're going to take a few minutes just to get some information about your early years and influences.
Sure.
What was your name at birth?
Well, I don't know exactly what you mean because no one called me by my name at birth.
What was on your birth certificate?
Oh, only Donald Trump knows what's on my birth certificate. It says Garry, 2 R's, Emmanuel Shandling. And then under sex, it says C long form.
Where were you born?
Well, again, that's personal. Unless you mean the city or something?
The city of your birth,
Tucson.
yes.
Tucson, Arizona.
And did you grow up in Tucson?
Grew up in Tucson. Went to the University of Arizona, and then moved when I was in 22, 23, something like that.
What was your father's name?
Irving Shandling.
And what did he do for work?
Printer. He owned a big, my dad owned a big printing company, lithography company. He had like 3 presses, and he did all the books for the University of Arizona and things like that. Sort of a noted printer within the printing industry, which is eventually going to be obsolete, I suppose, but he's passed away, so he's not missing anything.
What is your mother's name?
My mother's name was Muriel, and the same last name.
And what did she do?
She owned a pet shop, and she had her name. My mother was a little special, a little loopy, and she had her name above the pet shop. So it was the Animal Fair Pet Shop in a strip mall in Tucson, but it said Muriel Shandling's Animal Fair, like the name above the title of the movie if you're a big star. And you don't, if you think about it, you normally don't see the person's name who's the owner above the name of the store you're going into, except for Ralph's.
Were they funny?
Which?
But your parents, your mom and dad.
My mom was humorous in a way that was unintended, and my father had a kind of a dry wit, but not overtly funny, really.
Were there other traits that you inherited from them that you can recognize?
A concern for no reason. I would say I inherited that trait. A kind of desperate concern for what others might think, but I think that I've worked at stopping that cycle this go around with some self-awareness, hopefully. What do you think?
I think that seems to be working so far, yeah.
Right.
Did you have siblings?
I had a brother who died when I was 10. He was 13. He had cystic fibrosis, which is a lung disease. So while I was born in Chicago, we moved to Tucson because it was a dry climate, dry heat, unlike the Miami heat. I always thought the Phoenix team should have been called the dry heat, but they chose the Suns, I guess.
What did you want to be when you grew up at that time?
Well, looking back on it, it always fascinates me, to be honest. It fascinates too unimportant a word. I find it even bigger than that. But it seems like as a young boy of 12 or something, I would say I want to be a veterinarian or a comedian. And that makes no sense growing up in Tucson, Arizona, nothing of show business around me. No, I wasn't in theater, wasn't in the arts. But I listened to comedians, and I really didn't think that I could be a comedian. It really wasn't, that wasn't a reality. I find it interesting that I said that. Perhaps the subconscious does know more, as my analyst says. But what does he know? Who knows what he's really thinking?
What activities interested you when you were growing up?
Well, we were just joking about this because of Twitter. I actually was a kind of, I would say half nerd, because I also played baseball and all the sports and football and basketball and things like that. But then I had a ham radio set when I was 13, and I would sit in my room and talk to people all around the world. So I think I was just ahead of my time, because that's what Twitter basically is. And so I find it comfortable to sit there, and I use it mostly like the ham radio set.
So you were 13 when you started ham radio?
Yeah, so it gave me a great sense of geography and space, and made me question early what the relationships were with people all over the world. There was a sense of oneness there, because I would talk to them every day. But I don't find that in interviews. Kidding. Kidding.
What were your favorite TV shows when you were growing up?
Oh, I don't know if I for sure recall. I remember sort of being wanting to stay up late to watch Steve Allen and Jack Parr and all those sort of groundbreaking early talk shows. Otherwise, sports. I don't know. Probably some sitcoms that were around. They don't leave me with a sort of staggering memory. I would say the for some reason I was aware, as I find all comedians that I know say the same thing. I was somehow aware of comedians and would get their albums, like George Carlin, and I saw Woody Allen the first time, which we'll probably work our way around to in this. And I would watch the Tonight Show or Ed Sullivan or something and see comedians, and I was fascinated with it in a way that I was sort of unaware of, because I was shy, as most actually are. And one day in about 8th grade, 7th or 8th or 9th grade, I got up in front of class and did a Mel Brooks piece from one of his albums. And to me, it's still astonishing that I would do that. I wouldn't do that now. I couldn't go to a 7th grade class now and perform, for fear still that I would get beaten up after the class.
Did you find that you were sort of more interested in what Jack Parr was doing or what George Carlin was doing? Were you more interested in the hosting aspect or sort of the stand-up comedy aspect?
But that's a great question, because it gets into the acting part versus the sense of self and where you're coming from in your own observations and feelings. And I would say I probably didn't have that sorted out then. Comedy in general was an interest. And, I would actually say, as I'm hearing me say that, which happens frequently, I say I'm almost the same today. While I can have a masterful hand in a script, and sometimes an awful hand in a script, I also can just write a joke. And while I have a good sense of story, I can sometimes, I could host and did guest host the Tonight Show. So I think that sort of dichotomy of point of view has always existed within me. I'm seeing this interview from both perspectives. Sorry you have to go through this.
So if Parr was interviewing a politician, maybe you weren't as interested as you were if he was interviewing Bill Cosby.
That's probably right. And in hindsight, there's, I still get these old DVDs from wherever they're available, and I look at Parr, and still the amazing thing about Parr is when he is talking to Castro, for one thing, and he's Jack Parr. It's really astonishing. because he's not sliding into just being an interviewer. There was a guy who possessed both an awkward sense of a comedic character and an interviewer. What an interesting thing he had going, really. Very subtle. Some people wouldn't maybe notice it.
I agree. What did you study in college?
Well, I was an electrical engineering major, seriously, for 3 years. And one day I walked out of the lab. I was working in this engineering lab, designing circuitry. And I walked out to get some water, and I couldn't walk back in. I just literally, like in a movie, just couldn't. I just didn't want to do that. It's sort of been and that has been a sort of model of what I have felt every time I've changed directions in my career as I've moved along.
As you were thinking that, did you have an idea of what you did want to do?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. I didn't mean to overlap. I got genuinely excited to tell you. So at 19, I had 3 years of engineering under my belt, which included introduction to atomic physics and 21 units of math, and
a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, it was a struggle to maintain a C average, and that's my cell phone ringing because you probably won't edit that out, and probably years from now people won't know what that is, so that's why I want to explain that that's the thing.
We appreciate that
you get cancer from.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, being a ham radio operator and an engineering major, I can assure you that radio waves going through your head cause problems. We were always told to stay clear of RF energy. So when I see these news stories about cell phones and whether they cause cancer, I'm not saying they cause cancer. I'm saying 30 years ago in college they said stay away from RF energy. And sugar and fat. So there I was, unable to walk back into that class, and I thought, I can't do this the rest of my life. And I went home. I lived with my parents, and I went into my bedroom, and I don't know what happened, but I sat down and I actually thought, what am I going to do? Okay. And I really had no guidance, and I hadn't read any really books about it. So there I was thinking about it, and it struck me that, well, I liked comedy, and I at that point in high school and so forth, through high school I used to write funny essays, and I would read them in class, or it was clear that I could write to some degree. So I thought, this is what I like to do. And I seemed to be able to learn. I didn't think that I had any specific talent, or I didn't think that I had any gift, or that I automatically could do something, but I thought I could learn. I had the ability to learn. I was a good student, and I thought, what if I took that ability and applied it to something I liked? Which, of course, now you read about, that's what you're supposed to do. So I just got lucky. And I had the nerve to then say, okay, I'm going to check this comedy thing out and apply myself the way I did with my engineering background, which teaches you such discipline, which is what I always try to impart on young comedians starting. The discipline is really beyond comprehension.
So your engineering background helped.
I think the engineering
all of that
background
time spent working on it paid off.
I mean, you couldn't take a minute out to have fun and then pass that exam. I mean, I took one exam in a math class taught by a MIT professor where the average score was 10 out of 100. The average score was 10 out of 100. I got 12, and I thought, good, that's it. They were grading on a curve. I thought, good, I got a C. And he came in and he said, I'm failing everybody. And you just had to, it was just working on those equations. Sure, it prepares you for that script can be better, I think. It doesn't add up on this side. There's no getting around it. And then I worked with Al Jean, who's a writer. He worked on my first show, and then he worked on The Simpsons, runs The Simpsons, I think, basically. And he was a math major at Harvard. And so we talked about how kind of a certain knowledge of math can help understanding some formulas of comedy. And I think probably Stephen Hawking has a great sense of humor when you can get him loosened up.
And so when you decided to try your hand at comedy, is that what made you move to Los Angeles?
So somehow, again, looking back, I don't understand it myself because I see myself as shy. But I sat down, once I switched to the business college at the University of Arizona, I found it so easy that I had free time even in class. So I started to write monologues, like I wanted to test myself, and I wrote a few George Carlin type monologues around 70, right when he was going through this new phase of what he was doing. And I worked up the nerve to drive up to a club in Phoenix where he was playing, and I'd never been in one of those clubs or anything. They didn't exist. There were no comedy clubs. And I managed to find him in the club and asked him if he would read my material. And he said, well, and he was really nice. He said, I write my own material. And I said, I assumed, which I did. And I said, but there's nobody to give me feedback. There's nobody. I remember I had a writing professor because I went to graduate school in the writing program. And the professor said, Gary, I really don't know how to compare this to, it's very specific. And I remember giving him a Woody Allen, maybe Without Feathers, maybe it was Getting Even. So Carlin said, I'll read your stuff, come back tomorrow night. I went back to the club the next night, and he took me backstage, and there was my material on his table. He said, I looked at everything. We sat like you and I are now. He said, I looked at everything. You're very green, but I think you're funny. I think there's something funny on every page, and I think you should pursue it. If you're thinking of pursuing it, I think you should. And that's what gave me the kick to move to L.A., because he was very sincere. And I was not as I say, the confident, arrogant type that thought, oh man, I think I'm funny. I mean, I still think there's a very fine line in that confidence, arrogance line.
And did you keep up with Carlin over the years, or did you lose touch, and then did he remember having dealt with you early on? Or?
No, the humorous part probably is that happened to him probably in every club. In hindsight, that some kid came up to him. However, I think he got an American Comedy Award, which was a thing that was happening about 10 or 12 years ago, and they asked me to present it to him because everybody in his group there knew that story, even though I hadn't really kept up with George, which is something I regret. And I told that story, and he got up, and I was able to give him this comedy award after saying what he meant to me. And the first thing he said is, he says to the audience, I'm sorry for encouraging Garry. It's my fault. I'm sorry. And he got such a big laugh. And then when he died, which is, as we sit here, it's about 2 years ago, I'd become very good friends with his daughter and her husband, and that's a great relationship. And that connection has, in the long run, been a great relationship. More with his family now than when George was here, because he was also a removed guy, and just a completely, there is a gifted, prolific man. There's a guy who's done I don't know how many HBO specials.
And his last one was brilliant.
His last one was brilliant, and there's a couple of them that are pure genius. I remember being in this house laughing my ass off by myself. And growing. I mean, that's a guy who changed his style. And good example of changing your style and growing. And my story about him helping me reflects the kind of upon him the kind of man he was.
So getting back to the 70s, when did you start writing for sitcoms?
Well, I graduated from the University of Arizona I had a football scholarship actually, and I moved out to L.A. not knowing anybody. I mean, I had no connection, no anything. I was scared to death and naive as hell, and and I went to some comedy writing class, and there was a kid there whose father was a writer, and we wrote a script together, and somebody saw that, and then I wrote a script by myself, and somebody saw that who worked on Sanford and Son and said, try writing a spec Sanford and Son, and I wrote it and sent it to this guy, so I had a direct connection now, and I would have been 25 maybe, and he called me up and he said, it's not good enough for me to give to the producers of the show. This isn't up to the level of your other spec scripts that I've read. And all of my writer friends said, don't rewrite it, they'll never look at it again. And I asked him, what's wrong with it? Would you give me the notes? Ted Bergman, who deserves more credit than I could ever repay him for helping me as a writer, sat down with me and gave me the notes on that script, and I rewrote it and sent it back to him. And he called me up, he said, this is the best outside script we've seen. And then I met with the producers and pitched stories, and I ended up writing three that they shot. And while I was there, I walked across the hallway to Welcome Back, Kotter, and said, hey, I'm writing on Sanford and Son, would you read this spec Kotter? And there was this kid to me, now 25, and they read that and they said, this is great, you should write a Welcome Back, Kotter. And I didn't have an agent. And somebody gave me the name of an agent, and Norman Kurland, who's a kind of a renowned agent, television agent, and he didn't know who I was. And I said, well, I'm a new writer. And he said, and he was completely bored on the phone. He said, what have you written? And I said, well, 3 Sanford and Sons and a Welcome Back, Kotter. And he said, well, have you gotten them submitted? I said, no, they shot them. He said, wait, I don't understand. You're saying, what are you saying? I'm saying that I submitted them, and they bought them, and they shot them. And his entire tone changed. It was like a man coming alive, hearing some gigantic financial offer or something that he had won something. And he said, "You're saying that you've written 3 Sanford and Sons and a Welcome Back, Kotter, and they've shot them, and you don't have an agent? Can you be in here at noon?" I was surprised he didn't just pop up right then and there like one of those commercials. And I went in, and he just had me set up for meetings all over town, and that began my writing career.
Do you remember anything about that first Sanford and Son script and what it was about and when you first saw it air? And is there any memory of that being exciting for you? Or
yeah. It's very odd, and that would have been in a top 10 show at the time. Mm-hmm. It might have been a top 5 show at the time. So it was weird because, I didn't watch a lot of those sitcoms, so I had to watch it to write it. And I couldn't get a clear perspective when I saw my name come up, written by Garry Shandling, because I had just been in Tucson 2 years ago. And then about half of it was maybe rewritten, which is a really good percentage. Usually a script is rewritten.
Did it bother you at all at the time that you got rewritten?
No, somehow, no, because I never had an attitude about that stuff. I was more happy when I saw stuff that I had written, and usually the story would be intact and a lot of the jokes. And really speaking now, I would rewrite a script that comes in a lot. It's very rare when somebody from outside gets it close, and close enough to say, hey, we'd like you to write another one. And so that was more my signal that I was doing the job. It's also where I learned what the job really entailed, because the producers of that show, they were reading my second script that I submitted and giving me notes, and they said, the ending isn't right. And I said, but other than the ending, is there a lot of stuff? Do we stop, or do we stop now? Is this on? But I was saying that, so I turned in the second script, and they said, well, the ending isn't right. And I said, but other than that, I remember looking at them. I said, but other than that, I remember the feeling and everything. I mean, there's some good stuff in there. And they said, yes, but that's your job. And I have always taken that with me. So, when I'm in the position of being the boss and a guy turns in a script, or a writer turns in a script, and you go, there's no ending, and they go, well, but what about the rest? I mean, some great stuff in here, but we got to get the end. So, sometimes people can fall into a bad habit of thinking, the staff will rewrite it and find what needs to be found. When, like an engineering major, you've got to really solve the problem.
So it was 3 Sanford and Sons and 1 Welcome Back, Kotter. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then you did Harvey Korman.
Then I got job offers to write shows. Then I got job offers to write shows, and then I was writing scripts, and then they wanted me to write a pilot script, and I started writing a pilot, and I became a young, hot writer sexually, and then I got bored the same way I did in that engineering class. I kind of froze, and I looked at when the assignments were due, and I called up my agent. I said, I don't think I can do this. It was exactly the same turn as not walking back into the lab. And I said, I'd gone on stage once at the Comedy Store on amateur night, and maybe got 3 laughs, but it was enough to hook me, and it also made me realize I didn't have any idea what I was doing on stage, and it would be if I didn't start now to learn, I'd never learn. So I was about 27, and I just said to my writing agent, I can't do this. And he said, well, do you think you can make it as a comic? I said, I don't know, but if I don't try now, I won't know. And that shifted me into stand-up.
And you were in a pretty bad car accident.
Yeah. Right about that time, I had a bad car accident here in L.A., where I was really critically hurt and had kind of a death experience that I don't like to talk about except on bigger shows than this.
I understand.
Yeah. Even though this is like a memorial kind of thing we're doing. It's like a time capsule, graveyard, speaking tomb thing.
Do you think that, would you say the accident made you go into stand-up?
Yeah, I think...
Would your life be different without the accident?
I wouldn't have a scar that goes from here to there and then from here to there. But, the accident gave me some actual insight into life and its impermanence, and that there is something else to it than what meets the eye. That was my actual experience. And so I realized I best try to figure out who I authentically was, and that I could do that through stand-up.
And that's what attracted you to stand-up?
That's what attracted me to stand-up, is I can't do this because for some reason I don't know quite who I am, and I have to find out. So it was a parallel path. It was a true life path, and then the professional path really was secondary.
Do you remember your first time doing stand-up on television?
Oh, no. Because I did a lot of shows, not to diminish them, but what I remember vividly, which is everybody's, I mean, everybody says the same thing, is your first Tonight Show. And it just is different than all the other TV shows at the time. And,
So all the early ones sort of blend in.
all the
like
early ones
Tonight
blend
Show.
into pre-Tonight Show.
Right.
And even though, I mean, if I broke them down, they're all special in their own way. But the big change is, I always thought they were preparation for the Tonight Show, or preparation for continued growth. And my first Tonight Show,
Well, how were you discovered first? Do you remember?
yeah,
having
I'll
a
tell you
night?
the interesting thing about that is the talent booker for the Tonight Show, Jim McCauley, was in the back of the Comedy Store watching, and I had this great set at the Comedy Store, to the degree that he actually came up to me and said, that was so good that I have to come back to make sure it wasn't a fluke. I'll never forget that. And he said, I'll come back next Tuesday. And he came back the next week. And, you know, those things I say are in the hands of God, because it's the crowd, it's you. It's like an athlete playing a game. You don't know what you're going to have that day, and it just connected again. And he said, how's next Tuesday for the Tonight Show? And, you know, that's sort of, in hindsight, everything. I don't know that I had a goal beyond that professionally, to be honest.
What was your act at that time that the guy from the Tonight Show was watching? What was that style? What kind of humor were you doing?
I had just myself broken into a more personal style, talking about my girlfriend just broke up with me because she moved in with another guy, and I said, that's where I draw the line, and I dumped her, because I don't need another guy around the house. And that came out of a real breakup. And then it went on, and I talked about my father and my parents and camping and some actual experiences with the jokes that I write off of those that are very organic. And that first Tonight Show landed just like it did in the club. And
What do you remember about that night?
I think everything. And
That night, did you just do the stand-up act, or did you get interviewed by Johnny Carson?
oh, just the stand-up act. I remember being upset later, like my fifth or sixth time, that Johnny still hadn't asked me over to the desk. And by the time he did ask me over to the desk, I was within weeks of them saying, do you want to guest host? And I remember being gassed over to the desk, and Carrie Fisher had preceded me and was talking about her parents, Debbie Reynolds and Eddie Fisher at the time. And I sat down and I said, Johnny, maybe you know my parents, Irv and Muriel Shandling. And that made him laugh real hard. And I thought, that's where he decided to give him a shot, because it was very organic.
How was it working with Johnny?
You know, as everybody says, it's great. I mean, it's great. I mean, you want to do well for him. He wants you to do well. You have to step up your game to be present with him, and he isn't going to take a swipe at you. And a wink of the eye really did mean you're on course.
What do you remember about the first night that you guest hosted the Tonight Show?
I'd never hosted anything on TV. At least Letterman, who had done it, was the last new guy to do it before me. At least he'd been a weatherman in Indiana. I had never really been on TV, never hosted anything. And I sat down, I wrote in my journal, well, your only chance is to be at one with the Tonight Show. I mean, it wasn't like I could force anything, so I better be at one, which is a Zen approach.
Organic.
And I did my preparation, then I dropped it, and I'm sitting behind the desk, and then I realized my first guest is Joan Embry from the San Diego Zoo, who brings on an elephant into the middle of the stage. And I'm just holding onto that desk like, you know, I'm at sea, and this is my life raft, and at least I've got this that's solid. And now I have to walk into this big empty space And I walk over, and I realized the elephant was here, and Joan Embria from the San Diego Zoo was on the other side of the elephant, and she was making it do tricks. And I was shouting across the elephant, and you can still see it on tape. I shout for about a minute and a half before I realize I'm on the wrong side of the elephant. And I just make some move to get on the other side. And then I'd written some jokes, and then I'm a good ad-libber. I'm good on my feet, so to say. There I was on my feet. And I said, well, John, what tips do you have for, other elephants that might be watching who want to get into show business? And how come only big animals stampede? You ever see a bunch of squirrels running it? But big animals only go, hey, everybody, let's go together. And
so what I'm getting is, on some level, hosting can't really be learned. You can either do it or not.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah.
I mean, you can always improve.
Right. Would you say that in those first few weeks of guest hosting, was there anything that you did learn as as it went on?
They had one talk with me, the producers did, about I had a friend on, Martin Mull, at the time, and they said, you started to talk to inside with Martin. Just remember you're still on TV. And that's the one note I actually remember. Otherwise, to be honest, I remember Peter LaSalle, who's still with us, God love him, and he's a fantastic man, said to me, I don't understand how you do this. You haven't hosted anything, right? I said, right. He said, I don't understand how you do this. And I understand what he's talking about.
What, in your opinion, when you're watching TV, makes a good talk show host?
Oh, a completely organic person who's not selling anything but listening and talking and is only funny in context of the conversation.
Who do you think now is particularly good?
I think Jimmy Fallon is on his way to something really big.
Interesting.
I mean, we can go through all the others, but as the arc goes, I think he's on to something big.
I want to talk a little bit about your first Showtime special in 1984. It was called Alone in Vegas.
Yeah.
I found a quote from you at the time, which was, my goal isn't to not do anything that isn't true to what I am. I've spent years shedding any artificial technique. The Garry you see on stage is the same as in the living room. I'm not out to become a show business personality. What made you sort of arrive at that so early on in your career?
Yeah, I think you go back to the auto accident, and when I said I experienced what life was about, I knew there was something more important. And I still say today, I think I'm just barely professional, because, I haven't jumped on anything that has a big mass appeal, really. It's interesting to hear that quote. Then it sounds a little self-conscious, but a man who's struggling to be free.
But do you remember anything specifically about that first Alone in Vegas special, or what you were trying to accomplish there?
Well, I mean, there was the stand-up, which nobody had really seen for any length of time. So that was a very broad 25 minutes of stand-up, very broad Vegas, strong, me really belting it away. Some people have never seen me like that. But then also, the other half was the technique where I talked to the camera and took the audience with me. And to me, that was the interesting part of starting to explore something deeper about the medium and playing with it a bit. And it ultimately led really to my first series where I talked to the camera, which is not unique. Woody Allen did it in his movies, and I was certainly influenced by that. And I was not influenced by George Burns, who was before me, because I was too young to remember his show. But in hindsight, he talked to the camera, and Jack Benny may have during his stories, during his sitcom. I don't quite remember, but that had been dropped in the day.
What is it about sort of the deconstruction of these
Right.
showbiz things that
Right.
fascinates you so much?
Well, I think it has to do with my interest in deconstructing life, and the idea that life and death are two sides of the same coin. And I wrote something about the Dalai Lama told me that life and death are two sides of the same coin. And I said, just put it in the meter, man. Are you always on? But I think it's a deconstructing life. I think it's exploring life and what it's about. And, you can't walk around in life constantly deconstructing it, but you can on TV because it's a step away from life.
Who's Roy London?
Roy London's God and his. I think Roy London taught me everything about art and organic acting, being, writing, more than I ever learned from anybody. Acting teacher. Unspeakable how much insight he had, how many people he helped, really understood the core of what human beings deal with and cover and struggle with in their life.
Is there a way you can sort of sum up his philosophy? Or?
Before he died, he said, it's all about love. He said, every choice comes from trying to connect with love. That's what he said in his dying breaths. In class, he said, can you bring your vision of life and what you want life to be and the world to be into your work, even as an actor? In other words, much bigger than what the dialogue would be. Do you have the courage to discover something new about yourself while the camera's rolling? And absorb what that really means. How willing are you to, in that scene, actually discover something new about yourself that would normally be in private? And that's what great actors do, I think. I can't say how well or not I do that. It's something I just try my best at.
Was it London that kind of piqued your interest in acting versus stand-up comedy?
Yeah. He's a genius. That's the mentor. That is the mentor who says you've got something in there that's... And with each person, he could see the essence. He said, you must bring that essence. And that's not stuff you're brought up with. You're supposed to fit into society. You're supposed to do this or act this way or be this way. Or do you have the courage to be just the opposite of that?
But maybe a lot of the interest in deconstruction came from studying with him on some level.
Boy, he really, he worked on every script of It's Garry Shandling show, which was not necessarily a deep show, but we worked on deeper themes as an actor in it. I was playing much different things than was in the script. And every week we'd work. So he'd have this talk with me every week, and he would deconstruct what's happening there and how that applies to your personal life and what are you bringing personally when you're saying that line. You're not really saying, we can jump to Sanders, which he also helped me with the first 2 years. You're not really saying to Hank, you're an idiot. You're saying you love him. You're desperately trying to tell him you love him. You idiot. So it doesn't come out like you idiot, like a mean guy saying you idiot. If there is something else going on there, because I'm trying to get him to understand that I love him. Let's say that's Roy London.
So before we get to It's Garry Shandling Show, let's just touch a little bit on the Garry Shandling Show 25th anniversary special. Why did you choose that specific format?
I had done one special for Showtime, and they said, come in and pitch another one. So we're getting back to like the Sanford and Son style of what patterns replicated themselves in my life, and it was pitching. And honestly, I had all these ideas for specials that I don't remember now. And I was in the bathroom in the building where Showtime was, and I thought, why not do an artificial 25th anniversary special? And I think that would have been before anybody. I think Letterman has played with time and gone back, and I don't think it was from that at all, or I'd be happy to say I was influenced by that. It just struck me, and I see in hindsight how these pieces of the puzzle fit together, because there's a guy who's pretending like he hosted a talk show for 25 years, and I thought, I know I can pull that off and make it look real, and then it would be fun to write really funny sketches about things that failed as you look at the highlights. I don't know. It just happened. I mean, the idea just came out of the blue, in the bathroom. Where not very many good ideas come up.
In many ways, it was sort of a parody of the Tonight Show's, anniversary specials, and yet you got Carson to do a cameo. Do you have any memories of filming that with him?
I don't look back enough. You would think that's all I do. I think that's what people think is all I do, is sit around and look back. So you're making me think about it for really the first time in a week.
Well, if you watch it now, I watched it a few weeks ago. It's somewhat pointed, I think.
You got to remember that Johnny just never did anybody else's anything. So the fact that he said, I'll do something, meant I like this guy. It meant he respected the talent. I could barely fit that together. I mean, if I thought about it too much, it wouldn't be what I do. But I was gigantically grateful because he didn't do it. It really means something to me. I think I tend to do things that actually mean something to me, which becomes both limiting and then limiting.
So just before It's Garry Shandling show, Joan Rivers left her spot as permanent guest host on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Is that something you were interested in going after at all?
Well, I'd hosted Tonight Show maybe, I just don't even know, 15 times or something, probably, but and a week at a time.
Right.
And I was exhausted after every one of those weeks. And then, like the engineering class, like the Sanford and Son scripts, I went, do I want to do this the rest of my life? Which is, by the way, a great job, and the guys who can do it every night have a gift. I thought I would get bored eventually because I wouldn't be able to explore my acting and my writing. Probably some fear of success. But, I would break it down to, 30, 30, 30, and whatever that last 10% is, you can call it out. So I was asked to alternate with Jay Leno to be the guest host on Monday nights or whatever it was. But I had already started It's Garry Shandling's show. So I ran the show, so I couldn't run the show, write the scripts, rehearse, and then on Monday night go in. I'm not that guy who could then go and give 100% on the Tonight Show, let alone if I was going to do it every Monday night or every other Monday night. And I had to call Johnny on the phone and said, I can't do it. And he had just gone through the Joan Rivers thing where she didn't call him to say, I'm leaving to do my own show. So when I called Johnny, I said, it's Garry Shandling, Johnny. I can't host the show. And he said, here we go again. And he was totally joking. And, I don't think of these things. They're terrific moments in their own way, for sure.
So obviously, if you don't think about them necessarily, you have no regrets about not doing that or not taking the
No.
Letterman spot when he left for CBS. Or
I think I don't think about them because there's so many regrets. I would be devastated. I think I made a mistake every beat.
well, let's get on to It's Garry Shandling Show. What was it about?
I was about not making another big mistake. Just one mistake after the other. That's what it's going to say on the tombstone. Another mistake. Which show did you ask about?
It's Garry Shandling Show.
Well, I just couldn't do. NBC was very interested in me doing a sitcom, so I went into NBC and I said I'd like to do a sitcom where I play a comedian and I have a platonic girlfriend and it's just about my life. And they said, no one's going to watch that. Do you have to be a comedian? And I said, well, I'm not going to refer to it like in an inside way. It's just that I'll be relating to people in life, and that's what I do for a living. It's not going to be about me consumed with which club I'm working or anything. And they said, no, could you be a hardware salesman? I remember this really well. And I said, I want to talk to the camera. And they said, no. You can't talk to the camera. Can you talk to a dog? And then it brought back all my memories of writing sitcoms, which I'd already done, so I didn't need to write another sitcom. So Showtime said, well, you can do anything you want. We'd give you a series for anything you want. And no one knew what Showtime was. No one knew what cable was. But I heard the phrase, you can do whatever you want, and that's what I jump on. So women should know that if they want to have a relationship with me, that's the key phrase.
So NBC sort of
I'll
did
give
you
them
a
back,
favor.
and I will do them well. I will do well by them. They don't need to worry. I'm a tougher critic than anybody. That's what's hilarious.
It was good that you
I
did
never
it
thought about this till now. That's what's hilarious, is that they think they want something just the way they want it, when in reality, I'll give them exactly what they want if they just stay relatively clear, because I'm the kind of guy that wants to do his best.
So Showtime kept
Will you tell that to them for me?
It'll be on tape. They can
Okay,
see
good,
it on
good,
the internet.
Good. This should be, and then we'll cut it into other things.
So did Showtime?
Isn't that a good observation, Bruce?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I like that.
That's my buddy Bruce. That's one of my best friends, who's really one of my very best friends, who's happens to have done my makeup today.
And you look great.
Well, we should thank Bruce.
Thanks, Bruce.
And that's actually, that's the guy who does my hair calling me. That'll stop ringing in a second. There it goes. That message says, I don't know where I am. That's what the message says. And my favorite phone message I had, and these are all becoming obsolete as people have different kinds of answering devices, of course. I got my parents to make one when they were visiting that said, my dad said, this is Gary's dad, and my mom said, and this is Gary's mother, and we both love him very, very much. Leave him a message and he'll call you back. Something like that.
It's good to have that validation on your answering machine.
Yeah, it's the last time I had my parents on any project.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Showtime. So they allowed you to come on and basically do whatever you wanted, and they never interfered.
That's right. And I am my own toughest critic. I remember getting a TV Critics Award, and my opening was, no one hates me more than I do. So, ease up. Right. I am a very tough critic on myself. So I wasn't about to do something, well, I tried my absolute hardest not to do something cliche and bad, and something new and different that they wanted for cable. So those two met at the right time. Same with Larry Sanders, which we'll get to. So so-called cable television allowed me the opening, the freedom to do what I want, and I was lucky that they trusted, because I'd done 2 specials for them. And, they'd talk to me as we are. I can look at you in the eye and say, I'm going to do the best I can, and I have a vision, and then we'll go from there. And I'm very open to notes and stuff like that. Sometimes they need to be reinterpreted, but I know how to do that from experience. I'm very experienced. I was a very experienced writer. By the time I got to these shows, all my shows, I was the most experienced writer on the staff.
Right.
It's a very unique position.
How close was the Garry Shandling in that show to the person that you were at that time?
I think they're all. I think it's an exaggeration. I mean, I was at the South by Southwest festival in Austin, and they showed each show and said, and I took questions, and someone said, which is closer to who you are, Larry Sanders, Garry Shandling? And I said, they're both stretches of a guy that's not exactly the guy you're seeing in front of you talking now. And I guess that would be the best way to think of it, is look at me now and look at either of those shows. It's just not exactly this.
Variations on a theme.
Sure, I mean, I'm playing different emotional lives, and I mean, that show was just balls out funny. I don't think we ever tried to make any deep, meaningful life point. The theme itself was the structure of the show, which was breaking the conventions.
And breaking the fourth wall and talking to the studio audience. And
yeah. Oh, and I mean, there was some clever stuff. We let the audience vote on what I should do in the story. So, you know, I think it changed things because, you know, it was like bringing it all out, on all the conventions out and saying, here's how it works. Usually by this point, you marry the housekeeper so she can stay in the country. Do you guys think I should do it? Because I am not so quick to get married. And they would vote. And, you know, we had our tricks up our sleeve to go either way. I don't remember, you know, a great integration of a talk show, sitcom kind of thing. Mm-hmm.
Would you talk a little bit about the theme song?
That theme song, this is the theme to Garry's show. This is the theme to Garry. I remember, I mean, really, I have the complete point of view and concept of what that show was, from the ground floor up, what it represents, what it is about. So when it came to the theme song, I knew, because I never do a project unless I know what the heart of it is about. So then it's easy. Once you know the heart of it, you go with the theme song. And I remember, because I can't sing or anything, I said, no, the theme song has to be something like, this is the theme to the show, this is the theme to the show, this is the theme, this is the theme, this is the theme to, this is the opening theme to the show. And I didn't even know more, I didn't even want to know more than that. I said, you follow me? And Alan Zweibel jumped right on that. And I think he wrote 90% of those words. We wrote some together. And he took that lead and just went with it. And then we had two different guys come in to sing it, and one was goofier than the other, and we played it for somebody. And they said, well, you can't use that one because it's so goofy. And that's all we needed to hear.
So you kind of, you know, had the theme song to this show that was a deconstruction of sitcoms, just have it be a deconstruction of theme songs.
Yes. Yeah, once you start to deconstruct,
you might as well go all the way.
Sure.
All right, we're going to take a break to change the tape.
Okay, good.